For 6 years, I controlled my wife. There, I said it. Not in a way that involved screaming or physical force, but through restrictions, rules, and silent pressure. When we got married, I knew what kind of woman Angela was. Fun, lively, flirtatious. The kind of woman who walks into a room and makes men turn their heads. It made me proud, at first, but pride quickly turned into paranoia. At first, I made little comments about how other men looked at her. Then I started setting boundaries. No going out alone, no parties without me, no dancing at events. She agreed, maybe because she loved me, or maybe because she thought it was harmless. But tonight shattered everything I thought I had under control. It was a company event at a fancy hotel ballroom. Angela had been begging me for months to let her come. Just this once, Stefan. I want to meet the people you work with. Maybe I felt guilty for holding her back for so long. Or maybe I just wanted to prove to myself that she still listened to me. So, I agreed. I should have known better. Angela looked stunning, wearing a red dress that hugged her. As soon as we arrived, heads turned. I felt that familiar pit in my stomach, but I swallowed it down. She's my wife, I told myself. She loves me. The night started fine. We had drinks, small talk. Angela was her usual charming self, and people loved her. My boss, Brad, charming, successful, the kind of guy women giggle around, was particularly interested in her. I should have kept her close, but I wanted to show that I wasn't some jealous, insecure husband. So I let her go, let her socialize. And then I lost control. I watched her on the dance floor, laughing, twirling, letting my colleagues, my boss, put their hands on her waist, lead her in playful spins. The worst part? She was having fun. Not the forced, polite kind. The real kind. The kind I hadn't seen in years. Something inside me snapped. I clenched my glass so hard it nearly shattered. The way Brad looked at her, the way she leaned into him, whispering something in his ear. It was too much. I grabbed a bottle from the table, marched over, and in a blind fury, hurled it at the ground near Brad's feet. The music stopped. Gasps, whispers. Angela turned to me, face flushed from dancing, eyes wide with shock. Stefan, what the? I barely heard her. My vision tunneled on Brad, who looked between me and Angela with the kind of smugness that made my blood boil. Before I knew it, I had shoved him. Hard. What do you think you're doing with my wife? I barked. He barely stumbled, but the security guards didn't hesitate. Within seconds, I was grabbed, restrained, humiliated in front of everyone. Angela's voice cut through the chaos. Stefan, stop it. You're making a fool of yourself. I was dragged outside, the cool night air slapping me in the face. My boss followed, straightening his suit. You're done, he said, voice calm, but final. Clean out your desk Monday. Fired. Just like that. Angela came outside minutes later, her arms crossed. What was that? I ran my hands through my hair, pacing. What was that? What was that, Angela? You embarrassed me in front of my colleagues. You let that man put his hands all over you. She scoffed. I was dancing, Stefan. Like a normal person. Something you never let me do. You were flirting with him. And so what if I was? She snapped. You think I don't notice how you watch me like I'm some possession? You don't trust me. You never have. Because I know what kind of woman you are. I shot back, regretting it the moment it left my mouth. Her face twisted in something I couldn't recognize. Pity? Resentment? You know what, Stefan? Her voice was eerily calm. You're right. I did date Brad. The world blurred. The hotel, the valet, the city lights. It all became background noise. What? My voice barely came out. You want the truth so badly? Fine. I've been seeing him. It started months ago. Late-night meetings. Work trips. And you know what? It was easy, Stefan. It was so easy because you pushed me straight into it. I wanted to call her a liar. I wanted to tell myself she was just saying it to hurt me. But deep down, I knew. The signs were there. The sudden confidence when she talked about work. The way she'd started taking extra care in her appearance, even when I wasn't around to see it. I felt like I was drowning. You're joking, I whispered. Angela sighed, rubbing her temples. I was miserable, Stefan. You treated me like a prisoner. And when I finally tasted freedom, I realized how much I missed it. And no, it wasn't just Brad. It was me. I liked the way it felt to be wanted again. Tears burned behind my eyes. I wanted you. She gave me a sad smile. You wanted to own me. I wanted to scream, to shake her, to tell her that she was wrong, that I wasn't the villain here. But in that moment, I realized something terrifying. I had lost. Not just my job, not just my reputation. I had lost her. Angela didn't storm off. She didn't cry or plead for forgiveness. She just stood there, staring at me, waiting for me to say something. But I had nothing left to say. The last day at the office, I walked into the building for what I knew would be the last time, keeping my head low. People whispered as I passed. I could feel their eyes on me, some amused, some curious, but mostly indifferent. I reached my office, grabbing the cardboard box waiting for me. I didn't have much, some personal documents, a framed wedding photo of Angela and me, which I considered throwing in the trash, and a few other small things. I was almost out when I heard it. Laughter. I turned my head slightly and saw him, Brad, sitting at his desk, surrounded by a group of employees, casually sipping his coffee like nothing had happened. "Oh, look who decided to show up," he called out, grinning. I ignored him and kept walking. "You know, Stefan, I have to thank you," he continued, standing up. "Last night was quite the entertainment. You really should have seen yourself, losing your mind over a little dancing. It was pathetic, really." I stopped, my hands clenched into fists. I should have kept walking. I should have just left. But then Brad chuckled again and added, "I guess Angela just needed a real man to show her a good time." I turned so fast the box in my hands nearly slipped. The office went silent. Brad raised an eyebrow, still smirking. "Oh, come on, don't get all worked up. You knew this was coming." I walked straight up to him. He barely flinched. "You think this is funny?" I asked, voice low. "Oh, I know it is," he said. "You're just upset because you lost. Angela picked someone else and you." Before he could finish, I grabbed his tie and yanked him forward. His coffee spilled all over his suit. He gasped, stumbling. There was a collective gasp from the crowd, but no one stepped in. They were enjoying the show too much. Brad, sputtering, wiped his shirt. You. I didn't let him finish. I grabbed the back of his chair and pulled it out, forcing him to sit down with a hard thud. Then I leaned in, lowering my voice so only he could hear. "You think you won?" I whispered. "You think Angela picked you? She didn't pick anyone. She just wanted to feel free. And the moment she realizes what a joke you are, she'll regret ever touching you." Brad's face turned red. "You're nothing, Stefan. I own you." I chuckled. "Not anymore." Then I stood up and, loud enough for everyone to hear, I added, "Enjoy your coffee, boss." Then, before he could respond, I turned and walked out of the office. Behind me, people were whispering, some chuckling. Brad sat frozen in his chair, coffee dripping from his expensive shirt. It should have felt like a victory, but I knew better. It didn't take long before I realized I was in trouble. Brad wasn't the kind of man to let something like this go. He had connections. People who could make my life miserable in ways that went beyond firing me. By the time I got back to my apartment, I noticed something strange. A black car parked across the street. It wasn't one I recognized. I went inside, grabbed a duffel bag, and threw in some essentials, cash, a few changes of clothes, my passport. I wasn't sure where I was going yet, but I knew one thing: I couldn't stay here. Then my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. I hesitated before answering. "Hello?" Silence. Then a low chuckle. "You really shouldn't have embarrassed me, Stefan." "Brad." I tensed. "Stay away from me." "That's not how this works," he said smoothly. "You see, when someone like you humiliates someone like me, there are consequences." I peeked through the window. The car was still there. "You can't hide forever," Brad continued, "but I'll give you a choice. Run. Because if I see you again, you won't be walking away." The line went dead. I stared at my phone, my heart hammering. Brad wasn't just angry. He wanted revenge. And I needed to disappear. Angela's search. Meanwhile, Angela had finally realized her mistake. After I left the office, she had tried to call me. No answer. She sent messages. Nothing. She went home and found my things gone. That's when the panic set in. She ran out onto the street, looking around desperately. Where would I go? Without thinking, she ended up at a bar. Not just any bar, but one where she had once gone with Brad. Maybe he knew something. She found him sitting in the corner, drinking whiskey. He smirked when he saw her. Angela, regretting your choices already? She sat down across from him, glaring. Where is Stefan? Brad chuckled. You're looking for him? After everything? I made a mistake, she admitted, her voice quieter. I need to find him. Brad leaned back, smirking. Oh, Angela. Sweet, naive Angela. You think he'll just take you back? Her eyes darkened. I don't expect anything. I just want to fix what I broke. Brad's smirk faded. You know, I thought you were smarter than this. Angela clenched her jaw. And I thought you weren't such a coward. Brad's eyes narrowed. Excuse me? You're going after him because he embarrassed you. She shot back. That's it, isn't it? This isn't about me. It's about your ego. Brad's grip tightened around his glass. Careful, Angela. Before he could say more, the bar doors opened, and I walked in. The moment our eyes met, Angela's breath caught. Stefan. Brad stood up. Well, look who decided to show up. I clenched my fists. I'm only going to say this once, Brad. Stay away from me. Brad chuckled. Or what? Angela looked between us, suddenly realizing how dangerous this was. Stop it. Both of you. But it was too late. Brad lunged first, swinging at me. I dodged, grabbing his arm. He yelped, but I wasn't done. With one swift move, I shoved him back, sending him crashing into a table. Drinks spilled, people gasped. Brad groaned, trying to get up, but I was already walking away. Angela stared at me, eyes filled with something I couldn't name. I didn't stop. I had to disappear again, because this wasn't over. Months passed. I should have moved on. I should have forgotten her. But the past doesn't let go so easily. I disappeared. I cut off everyone. I changed numbers, moved between cities, never staying in one place for too long. Maybe it was paranoia, or maybe it was just survival instinct after what Brad pulled. Either way, I stayed under the radar. But rumors travel faster than people. And one day, sitting in a roadside diner in Nebraska, I heard one that nearly made me choke on my coffee. Angela was living with a biker. After our last encounter, Angela had spent weeks trying to find me. At first, she searched everywhere. Hotels, old friends, even mutual acquaintances. But I had made sure to stay gone. Eventually, she stopped looking. Brad had moved on, his grudge apparently buried beneath whatever corporate ladder he was climbing. Angela, on the other hand, had drifted, lost and restless. And then she met him. Arnie, a biker, 10 years older than her, rough around the edges, but charming in a way that drew her in. He had a reputation, one that made people speak in hushed tones whenever his name came up. He ran with a group that traveled up and down the Midwest, always on the move, never tied down. At first, it was just a distraction, a way to forget about me. But then, one night, after too many drinks and too many regrets, she let him take her home. And that was the beginning. She stopped searching for me. She stopped thinking about Brad. She became part of his world. And now, it was my turn to come looking for her. I found them in a small town on the outskirts of Kansas. A dusty little bar on the edge of nowhere, the kind of place where time moved slower and everyone knew each other's names. Angela saw me first. She was sitting outside on the wooden porch, sipping beer from a bottle, her hair messy from the wind. For a moment, she just stared. Then she stood up, setting the bottle down. I stepped closer. So, this is what you chose? She crossed her arms. You disappeared, Stefan. What was I supposed to do? Sit around and wait for you forever? You didn't wait long, I muttered. Angela flinched, but then her face hardened. You made it clear you didn't want to be found. I moved on. I exhaled sharply. I had imagined this moment for weeks, months even, but now that I was here, I didn't know what I wanted to say. I heard what you did for me, I said finally, with Brad. I know you stood up for me. She looked away. I don't want to talk about that, but I do. Angela shook her head. It doesn't change anything, Stefan. I messed up. I lost you. And now, she gestured vaguely. Now this is my life. I stepped closer. And is this really what you want? Her jaw clenched. It doesn't matter what I want. I sighed. Angela. A voice interrupted. You're trespassing, friend. I turned. Arnie stood in the doorway, arms crossed, a slow smirk on his face. He was taller than me, broader, with a beard that made him look twice as rugged. His leather jacket was worn, the patches on it telling me everything I needed to know. I squared my shoulders. I just came to talk. He chuckled. Well, you talked. Now you can leave. I glanced at Angela. She wouldn't meet my eyes. For a long moment, I considered staying, forcing the conversation. But something about Arnie's stance told me he was waiting for that. He wanted me to push my luck. So I didn't. I turned and walked away. And that should have been the end of it. A week later, I got a message. Unknown number. Let's talk. No hard feelings. Just a drink. Same bar. You owe me that much, don't you? I knew it was a bad idea. I went anyway. The bar was nearly empty when I arrived. Arnie was waiting at a table in the back, 2 glasses already poured. He grinned as I sat down. Didn't think you'd show. I eyed the drink in front of me. You said you wanted to talk. So talk. He leaned back, taking a slow sip of his own glass. Angela told me about you. About how you two used to be. Seems like you had a good thing. I didn't answer. Arnie chuckled. Problem is, good things don't last. People change. Women move on. I clenched my fists under the table. Is that what this is about? You trying to prove something? He shrugged. Just making conversation. I exhaled. I'm not here for a fight, Arnie. Good, he said. That makes one of us. And then the world went black. The hospital. I woke up to the sound of beeping. A hospital room. Bright lights. A dull, pounding ache in my skull. A nurse noticed I was awake and called for a doctor. I barely heard her. My head was spinning. Then, the memories came back. Arnie. The drink. The trap. I tried to sit up, but pain shot through my ribs. Easy there, the doctor said, stepping in. You're lucky. Nothing broken. But you took beating. I barely heard him. My thoughts were elsewhere. Angela. Where was she? I found out soon enough. She and Arnie were gone. No trace. No messages. Just disappeared. But not completely. Because I heard something else. A rumor, whispered between the nurses. Something about a biker rally in South Dakota. And just like that, I had a destination. The chase. I drove through the night, crossing state lines, heading north. The rally was one of the biggest in the country. A place where people could disappear into the chaos. But I wasn't going to let that happen. It took days of searching, asking around, pushing deeper into the crowd of leather jackets and roaring engines. And then, finally, I saw him. Arnie, laughing with his crew, a beer in hand, completely unaware that I was watching. I tightened my grip on the wheel. This wasn't over. Not until he knew what it felt like to lose everything. And as for Angela, I didn't know if she was still with him. I didn't know if she was running from me or from the mess she had made. But one thing was certain. I wasn't leaving without answers. And I wasn't leaving without justice. Actually, that's what happened, and Arnie regretted his vile act. After which I finally forgot about this horror. After everything that happened, the betrayal, the fights, the months spent running, I told myself there was nothing left for me in that town. But when my business with Arnie ended in South Dakota, when the anger faded and all that was left was exhaustion, I found myself driving back toward home without really knowing why. Maybe I just didn't know where else to go. But coming back led me to something I never expected. Her name was Victoria. I pulled into town late at night. It looked the same. Same quiet streets, same familiar corners where old memories lurked like shadows. I wasn't sure if I had made a mistake coming back, but I told myself I wouldn't stay long. Just a few days to clear my head, maybe sell what little I had left and figure out my next move. I stopped by a diner I used to go to, the kind of place where the coffee was always hot and the waitress knew everyone by name. It was almost empty, just a few people scattered in booths. I sat down at the counter, ordered a black coffee, and tried not to think about everything that had led me here. That's when I saw her. She was sitting alone a few seats down, stirring her tea absent-mindedly, staring at the steam like it held all the answers. She had long brown hair pulled into a loose ponytail and tired eyes that said she hadn't been sleeping much. She caught me looking, gave a polite but exhausted smile, then went back to staring into her cup. I wasn't looking for conversation, but when the waitress brought me my coffee, she leaned in and whispered, "That girl's been sitting there for hours. Looks like she could use a friend." I wasn't anyone's friend anymore, but something about her, the way she looked like she was carrying the weight of something heavy, felt familiar. So, against my better judgment, I said, "Long night?" She blinked, as if surprised someone had spoken to her. Then she exhaled a soft laugh. "Long week." I nodded. I know the feeling. For a moment, she hesitated, then slid over a seat closer. "I'm Victoria. Stefan." She studied me, tilting her head slightly. "You from around here?" I was. "Left a while ago." "Yeah," she murmured, looking back at her tea. "I'm about to do the same." I didn't ask why. I had my guesses, but she answered anyway. "Caught my boyfriend cheating on me. Packed my bags and just left." I let out a short breath. "Guess we've got something in common, then?" She glanced at me, eyebrows raised. "Yeah? Yeah," she sighed, shaking her head. "Love really knows how to make fools of us, doesn't it?" I gave a dry smile. "That it does." We sat there for a while, not saying much. Just two people who had been hurt in different ways, trying to figure out where to go next. Then she said, "I'm heading to Virginia. That's where my family is." I took a sip of coffee, staring at the dark liquid. "Haven't been to Virginia in years." She looked at me for a long moment, then made a decision. "Come with me." I blinked. "What?" "You said you don't have anywhere to be, and I don't feel like driving across the country alone." She shrugged. "Just until we get there. No expectations." It was crazy, but maybe crazy was exactly what I needed. "All right," I said. "Virginia it is." We left the next morning. The car was hers, a little blue sedan that had seen better days but still ran smoothly. She let me take the wheel while she navigated, marking small towns on the map, picking roadside diners that looked decent. At first, it was quiet. Neither of us talked much, both lost in our own thoughts. But slowly, as the miles passed, that changed. She told me about her life. A small-town girl who had big dreams, but somehow ended up stuck in the same place for too long. She had met her ex when she was 19, thought they'd be together forever, only to find out he had been lying to her for months. I told her bits and pieces about myself. I didn't go into detail about Angela or Arnie, but I told her enough, that I had been married, that it had ended badly, that I had been running ever since. She didn't ask for more. She just listened. We stopped at gas stations, shared meals at diners, slept in cheap motels when we were too tired to keep driving. And somewhere along the way, the silences between us stopped feeling heavy. One night, outside a small motel in Kentucky, we sat on the hood of the car, watching the stars. The air was cool, the kind of night that made everything feel just a little bit lighter. She glanced at me. "You ever think about starting over?" I exhaled. "I don't know if I know how." "You learn," she said simply. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt something shift inside me. Maybe I could learn. By the time we reached Virginia, something had changed. It wasn't dramatic. There was no grand realization, no sudden moment where everything made sense. It was just easy. Victoria's family welcomed me without question. I helped her move into her old childhood home, a small house with a porch swing and a backyard that stretched into the woods. Days turned into weeks, and before I knew it, I was fixing things around the house, helping her repaint the walls, talking about maybe finding a job in town. One afternoon, she handed me a cup of coffee and leaned against the kitchen counter. "So," she said, "are you staying?" I looked around. The place felt warm, lived in. It felt like something I hadn't had in a long time. "Yeah," I said. "I think I am." She smiled. "Good. Leaving the past behind." The past didn't disappear overnight. Some days, it still caught up to me. I still thought about Angela, about the life I had lost, but it didn't hurt the same way anymore. Because now, when I woke up in the morning, I wasn't alone. Now, I had something new. And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't looking back. I was moving forward.